Hello and welcome on in, everybody. Good to see you. Thanks for joining us. I'm your host, Sam Peterson, and I'm here with our guest today, Hank Washington, who's going to be doing a little bit of lettering for you all. Hank, how you doing today? Thanks so much for joining us.
Doing good, doing good. I'm super happy to be back with the Adobe family for sure.
Awesome. Well, before we jump into it, I just want to give everyone a quick little reminder that if you're watching over on YouTube and you want to join the main chat, you're wondering who we're talking to, we're over here on Behance, so definitely feel free to come on over if you have any questions or comments for us. We'll check it out there. Also, want to say hey to everyone in the chat. What's going on, Annika? We got Oliver and Gareth, Christelle, Alessandra. Welcome on in, everybody. So Hank, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself for anyone who may not be familiar with who you are, and a little bit about what we're going to be working on today.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Hank Washington. I am a designer, art director, and illustrator, currently working out of the great state of Georgia. I am also the founder of Hank Design Studio, which is a creative studio that's helping make brands turn strangers into friends. And I'm also the founder of Fuzzies, which you can see on the attire today, which is an illustration project that celebrates culture and diversity in a much vibrant way. Again, just super excited to be back. And today we're going to have a little bit of fun with some lettering using Illustrator to where we can take a fuzzy approach and have some fun with it using these tools and hopefully show our watchers today how to make the lettering stand out.
Very cool. So is this going to be kind of a similar style to your fuzzies?
It's going to be a little adjacent to it. So we may not necessarily have the direct fuzzy texture or approach, but we want to have something that's in harmony and kind of have the same type of feeling and kind of similar approach, but not directly the same. So it's going to be a little different than what we're used to seeing in the fuzzies universe.
Okay, very cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if anyone's not familiar with his work, definitely check out his socials. Where's the best place to see your work for everyone who hasn't?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to my Instagram is IAM_Hank, or just put Fuzzy's Code in Instagram, it should show up as well. I'm also on Behance as well. And you also can follow my studio's work at hankdesigns.com.
Okay, cool. Yeah, Annika put those in the chat, so definitely check them out if you haven't already. So yeah, we can just jump into it whenever you're ready.
Yeah, absolutely. So where we're getting started with, as you can see here to the right, I took some time and went into just Photoshop and just came up with some different lettering approaches around the phrase "can't fake the fuzz." If you ever are familiar with a lot of 70s music, or especially like the Jackson 5 or anything like that, you've probably heard the phrase "can't fake the funk," but we're going to switch it up, and we're going to say "can't fake the fuzz" in this case. So what I've done, I just went ahead and just kind of worked on a few compositions. Like, these are a little rough. I'm first to admit that, but I wanted to keep it loose and kind of have a little bit of fun. And ultimately, we're going to clean it up here using Illustrator. And then we're also going to dive into a little bit of how to use the blend tool and to give us kind of that 3D look and effect to really help these pop out in the way that we see fit. So I think today we're going to spend most of the time just really building out these compositions, seeing what feels right, probably experiment a little bit more, and then ultimately pick one that we can dive into and have more of a special effect to it when we go into Photoshop as well.
Okay, very cool. So did you say that you did the sketches for these initially in Photoshop?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these are done just on paper, and then just kind of taking a quick picture and then redoing the script in Photoshop, just using the brush. Again, just keeping it very loose, not really putting too much, I guess you could say, effort or heart into it, because I want to make sure that we take advantage of Illustrator to really build these out. So
Okay, so you do these handwritten with the tablet, I assume?
yes. Mm-hmm. With
Nice.
like a Wacom with the brush as well, with the pen as well, and just kind of using a very light brush and just changing the settings, which we can get into here a little bit, but showing basically just the settings to where the brush is a little bit tight and is not too reactive to my hands, because it takes me a few times to get the strokes and everything right, but you can adjust it to where it's not as reactive to some of the curves and things that you have on there. So
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so what I'm gonna do here, I'm just gonna start with pretty much just random one. I think we're gonna start with this one here. And what I'm gonna do is just get a new layer, and we're just gonna set this as kind of our base here, um, just so we can have kind of a guide to work with. Then let me see, let's turn down the opacity up here at the top, just enough that we can still see it, but it's not too distracting as well. And essentially this same technique we're going to repeat through all the different concepts here, but again, with here, we're just going to start by just getting us a baseline, right? Because again, these were kind of loose, but with Illustrator, we're going to tighten them up a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is, let me see, go up here and give this stroke a little bit of some color fill. We're just going to use black for the moment. And I got it at an angle just so it gives it a little bit of direction, but it also can dictate the way the letters actually are forming when we're writing those out, or when we're tracing those out. So I'm just going to kind of get here to the X height, just kind of guesstimating a little bit of where these are going to sit. And we're just going to repeat this process pretty much for each word here.
And do you ever,
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say, do you ever start with a font as a base, or do you like to always start just handwriting it out yourself?
I like to handwrite it out myself. In some cases, I do look to typefaces to kind of see how certain letters are formed. Some typefaces were a big inspiration to how the F was formed for fuzz. Just because there's a lot of unique ways that, you know, certain letters kind of sit next to, you know, to others as well. So like most cases, it's kind of like L and I's, and, you know, if you have like two S's, how they form together, in cases like that. But mostly this is kind of freehand, and then just kind of pull into certain typefaces to kind of find that specific letter and how they approach that as well.
Okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like I said, we're just going in here and we're just kind of setting our X height with our letters, just so we kind of have a little bit of balance, and we can always go in and check those as well. So what I'm gonna do is kind of have our layer name here changed to guides as well. And then we'll just make sure this is called sketch 1, just so we can have it for reference. Okay. And I think this is starting to come together. I think we're having a nice kind of balance here. Of course, we can see some of the letters are bleeding on through the you know, the top of the X height, which is completely okay. So we can definitely, you know, work around those. So let's lock that in. And now we can actually get into the nitty gritty of actually filling out these letters. I like to start big and then work my way to the smaller ones, just so the smaller ones like the can't and the D can kind of fit into those negative spaces. And even in the case that we see that these aren't working, we can always go and use a typeface that complements this as well. So since it's kind of more of a script, we can always go in and find a nice like serif typeface to, you know, complement it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Also,
so what? I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say hey to Frank and Peter. We got a couple of people joining us in chat. Welcome on in, everybody.
What's going on? Welcome, welcome. Absolutely. So what I'm doing now is I'm just following the middle of these letter forms, and basically just building out the spine of these. So if I was to add, you know, extra weight to the stroke, it should fill in these letters pretty seamlessly. But I'm just going in through the middle of the stroke, and you can see I'm just trying to use very 90-degree angles of just like handling kind of the strokes and things like that. So if you hold down shift, you can see that some of the anchor point kind of adjusts as I move the mouse here. So it's kind of keeping the angles kind of tight, and we can always go back and adjust even if it's perfect. And in some cases, it's not going to look, you know, how we want it. So we can kind of cheat a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the pen tool is one of those things that once you get the hang of it, like once you kind of get the learning curve, there's a lot of control with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I do all my work in Photoshop primarily, but
Hmm.
here and there I've had to explore the pen tool. And I know a lot of people say, they have trouble with it at first, but I feel like
Hmm.
once you just use it a little bit, you kind of realize like how much you can really control those anchor points and those handles and
Absolutely.
make it really precise.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a learning curve. Even when I was learning it at first, there was a lot of exercises that one of my professors made me do to like get comfortable with it. But once you understand it, like it really makes like the workflow much seamless. It keeps your illustrations much tighter. If there's ever a case you need something done in like a vector format. And also is very beneficial if you ever working with like an animator or you're doing animations in these cases. The vector points make a huge difference in just that workflow and that process. If you ever have to utilize After Effects with Illustrator as well, or build out anchor points in After Effects directly.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's
Yeah.
just really nice to be able you can kind of rough it in, but you can always go back and adjust it ever so slightly. Whereas, when I'm using like the brush tool or something in Photoshop, you got that one stroke and then you have to redo it if it's not quite right. So it's nice to have that flexibility.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the neat thing with like the kind of some of the anchor points within Illustrator now is that if there's ever like a subtle adjustment, and I just did it here on this F, but if there's ever like a subtle adjustment that needs to be made, I can direct select it, which if I hit my short key A, which will give me the direct select tool here, I can go in and actually adjust that anchor point alone just by using my arrow keys, which
Oh, wow.
makes it very, very useful whenever you need to move it like just so slightly.
Yeah, I use the arrow keys all the time for subtle movements like that, but I didn't know you could use it for the pen tool in that way. So learn
Absolutely.
something new.
Absolutely. That's what I'm here for. Yeah. So again, just going in and just really just finding kind of a nice um, middle ground when it comes to adding strokes to the middle of these. Now, some of these points we may have to revisit just because like when you have a curve that kind of overlaps itself. So with this kind of being this bubbly square front, ideally from the illusion, it kind of looks like this stroke is behind this that goes down, that goes into the K. So we may have to revisit that to make sure we have the right type of look. But for now, I'm just going to connect it all as one. But we may have to disconnect it, which I can show kind of a neat little shortcut that can make that look really seamless as well.
Okay, nice. Also want to say hello to Alexis in the chat. Welcome on in.
Hello, hello.
Peter says, "Wait, you didn't know this? I'm a pen tool rookie, Peter. You got to understand."
Absolutely. Yeah, it did take a lot of experimentations to like really get used to the pen tool. So, and I'm even not 100% used to it, just all the capabilities that it has, but I highly recommend it definitely for work like this as well.
Yeah, I think there's that dynamic between the sort of like vector world and raster world where it really depends what you need to do. And I spend most of my time in raster. So I use a lot of like, the tablet with the brush tool and that kind of thing. But there's certain applications where, the pen tool or raster makes a lot more sense. And recently with some of the work I've been doing, I've been kind of discovering that a bit. So it's always kind of fun to venture into those new tools and, use whatever's really like best suited to what you're doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I saw some of your illustrations, man. I really dig it. And I think we're kind of in the same boat of, having that balance between vectors and, and having things rasterized. And it was most of the fuzzy illustrations that I do have are definitely pixel based and heavily in Photoshop. So, I think it's kind of a nice balance to have as an overall, kind of an overall illustrator and creative as well.
Yeah, I was checking out, I think a previous stream you did where you were working on them, and I was surprised to see like you're doing a lot of kind of shape tools and stuff like that to create those illustrations. But it was in Photoshop, which I thought was really interesting because a lot of times when I see that kind of geometric or shape-based illustrations, a lot of the time it's an Illustrator, but that was really neat to see.
Absolutely. Yeah, the neat thing with like using a lot of shapes in Photoshop is that you can actually use them as masks and kind of like guides for different things for like for example, if you're needing a specific area to maybe add shading and you want it to be really tight on a curve, you can actually use like the pen tool in Photoshop, which is very similar to the pen tool in Illustrator, to kind of mask an area to, kind of give you a more precise. So that way you're not so intricate and you don't have to worry about being so tight with whether you're using a tablet or you're using your mouse. You know, that's definitely kind of a nice little workaround that kind of merges those two worlds together. So
Definitely. Yeah. I think whenever I've had to approach more geometric things like that, using shapes or selections as guides is always really helpful to get those kind of like clean edges.
absolutely. So I think we're kind of in a good spot. I don't want to jump ahead of myself too much, but I think we're in a good spot as far as like mapping out the fake. So what I'm gonna do is just name this layer as fake, and we're just gonna keep it all separate, just so that we're able to kind of maneuver them one layer at a time. And we're gonna kind of repeat the same process here with fuzz as well. Again, nothing different, just kind of just following the middle, almost if you were going to give these letters like a spine. So you want to just kind of pretend like you're, building a human or something like that. You can just find the middle, see like where the backbone would be of these letters. And there's a lot of crossing here, so we'll definitely cover that once we start to add a little bit more depth to these letters, and how we can make these look more seamless, almost look like things are stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, very cool. Are you kind of going for like a depth effect with the different layering?
Yes. So what we're going to use is the blend tool, which gives you kind of a nice illusion of a 3D effect. And it's very useful if you ever want to like find the middle ground between 2 points. So if you have like maybe a square that molds into a triangle, the blend tool does a really great job of really finding those in between so that you don't have to kind of tweak it one by one. And it has a great illusion effect that I think is very much stepped on in Illustrator as well.
Very cool.
Yeah. So even if you're not, familiar with Illustrator or not familiar with like Photoshop, you can always kind of have that illusion or that depth effect using Illustrator.
Mm-hmm. Well. Would you say you primarily use one or the other? It sounds like you use both in your workflow quite a bit. Is it like 50-50 or are you predominantly one over the other?
I would say it's probably like 60-40 Photoshop. I think I work in Photoshop mostly because that's kind of where a lot of the illustration magic happens. Mm-hmm. And I think that's probably like where I would put it, like 60-40, just because Illustrator is great, but for my primary like needs, I think Photoshop covers most of the bases, except in cases like this. But it's very hard to judge because it's almost like per project in a sense.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
kind of like, it's like, oh, this makes sense to stay in Illustrator. Like, if it's like branding, if you're doing like a logo or something like that, like, yeah, it makes sense to stay in Illustrator. But, in other cases, like, okay, maybe we should draw fuzzy today. Yeah, we might want to keep this in Photoshop.
Yeah. And I mean, looking at your work, it makes sense. It seems like you kind of do have a little blend between the two in terms of what would be best. But it is interesting because like in Photoshop, there is a lot of stuff that you can do that if maybe you think usually you'd use Illustrator for this, it does have tools that you need if you're really comfortable in Photoshop. You don't want to have to learn new software, but
Absolutely.
It's also good if you're doing a lot of both to learn that other software, because sometimes you're just like, oh, this is so much more suited to this purpose. So yeah,
Absolutely.
it really does depend on what you're working on per project.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's so much similarities when it comes to like working in the different, Adobe programs that they kind of have the same type of workflows. Obviously there's like big differences, but if you can understand the aspect of layers and blend modes and kind of like the pen tools and things like that, and how to work like text and type, a lot of these tools, they kind of have a very similar layout that seems very familiar once you get comfortable. When I was getting started and early on in my career, I kind of had this mission to go out to learn the software before I actually learned the actual skills, kind of like being a creative. And I think one of the most intimidating softwares at the time was definitely like Photoshop and like After Effects. But after getting into it a while and like literally taking like baby steps, of trying things, it was, you start to see the similarities and you can kind of like know where things are based on kind of your intentions and needs. And kind of once you have like not to say like a style, but you have like a go-to technique for certain things, you kind of know how to repeat it in most cases in almost any type of software you decide to use.
Yeah, for sure. I think when I've kind of dabbled in Illustrator before and done different things in there, when I was first doing it, you kind of realize the layout is actually pretty similar, and then it
Yeah.
just takes a little bit of getting used to, like, to see how the workflow in Illustrator is different from Photoshop. But I think what you said about baby steps is the biggest thing, because anytime I've had to learn software, especially if it's more complex software like 3D or something like that, it's always very intimidating in the beginning. And I think that's common for a lot of people. But it's like, if you just dabble in it and don't expect to maybe create like your masterpiece on the first day, but just dabble in it a little bit here and there, and you'll kind of get familiar with the UI and the common tools and then the workflow. And before you know it, you've only been using it for like a week and you're actually pretty comfortable in it.
Absolutely. Because it's very easy to go on places like Behance or Instagram or just anywhere that you find inspiration, and you see these super complex like 3D projects that look amazing, and it almost feels like when you open it up, it's like, all right, I need to create something like this. And I think it's so easy to compare like step 1 to somebody else's step 3,000. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's I think that's a huge like intimidation factor that I think if more creatives who are looking to experiment in 3D or any type of medium that they're not familiar with can get over, I think like that'll literally change the perception of like trying new stuff. But definitely shout out to those who are mastering the 3D world, because I've seen some projects that I'm like, I think I'm gonna stay over here.
Yeah. I mean, I've definitely had that before when I was like trying to learn some new things here and there, but it was the mindset and expectations that I changed, where it's like, okay, I'm not going to do something super cool on week 1, but I'll learn it on week 1, and then I'll start trying to play around to do some cool stuff on maybe week 2 or 3. But I think if you just have that expectations where it's like, I got to take some time to get used to this for a few days and play around, the frustration just like melts off, or at least for me, it did.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And one thing too, like even if it's something that you're learning that you want to ultimately sell, like as as part of your creative service or get hired for, like what you may feel is, maybe like quote unquote mediocre compared to like people who've been doing it for years, or who's like we talked about before, on like 3,000 steps. There's someone out there that's going to love what you do. You know what I mean? And I think that can still be an inspiration, and you can always continue to learn. But I think, there are people out there that are not familiar with just this creative space as a whole. So there are things that we create that we may feel that like, this could be a whole lot better. But someone feel like, oh, this is like the world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. We're always our own worst critic for sure.
100%. 100%.
Also, Peter says you can use the new intertwine tool here too. Have you used that tool yet? I know a lot of people are talking about it.
Yes. I actually experimented with that a little bit here. I actually want to test it here. I think that'll be kind of a fun little experiment. I've been seeing it, and I saw the the announcement for it, and it looks amazing. It is much more much more convenient than kind of using some of the Pathfinder tools and kind of doing it the manual way. So I think that'll be dope. I think we can try that.
I also saw, I think it was Tyler doing the Illustrator challenges last week. I think he fit the intertwine tool into one of those. If anyone hasn't seen it, definitely check it out.
I know, that's awesome.
And Annika has a question asking, has Hank ever done hand lettering or calligraphy?
Great question. I have. It was always for personal projects. I was a huge fan of a lot of lettering artists when, I was, before I actually got into it. One of my favorite was Ade Hogue, who was kind of a good friend of mine, well, distant good friend. We never met in person, but I always knew him. And I was a huge fan of his work, and he has amazing lettering projects that he's done. I think one of my favorite was, his tribute to Nipsey Hussle, unfortunately after his passing. And that was kind of a big inspiration. But I've done a little bit for some client work as well. Not the primary go-to things, but it's definitely something that I enjoy doing. Like if there's ever an opportunity to do like some lettering, I'm not hesitant to take it on as well.
Do you know what originally kind of got you into art? Was it stuff more along like the graphic design or lettering area, or was it more illustration based, or what was a little bit of like your start with getting into art initially?
Yeah, it really happened. I would say probably like late elementary, can't even say the word, elementary going into middle school. My older brother was an artist as well. He was a phenomenal illustrator, or still is a phenomenal illustrator. And he was kind of the first person that I saw like show like what it looked like to be a creative, like, having the creative lifestyle. So he was, his room, our bedrooms were right across from each other, but his room used to be filled with a lot of like movie posters. And he loved music. He DJs as well. And he used to have a lot of like new albums. This was back when, in CDs, you had to wait on CDs to actually get into the stores before, streaming and all that. So he used to have a lot of new music. And he used to have these shelf full of sketchbooks of just illustrations that he'd done in high school. And it used to be illustrations of like Boondock characters, the cartoon. Some of them were reinterpretations of like some of his classmates and things like that. So he was kind of the first person to expose me to what creativity even looked like as just a hobby. But you can see it kind of all through his lifestyle and everything else. It was always creative in things like the clothes he wore, the way like, he took care of his car, things like just the way he moved and all that. So that was kind of my first exposure to essentially just the art world. Down the road, I was getting into high school and I was kind of in that weird space where, graduation's coming up, you're trying to figure out like what's really next. And I wasn't really sure as far as like what I wanted to do kind of like post graduation. Because I was an athlete. I kind of had this ambition of, playing at the next level. I didn't have the height, nor the skill to get there like I wanted to, but just trying to figure that out. And a buddy of my brother's, which is still a good friend of mine as well. He was also an artist as well. So he hung around a lot of like his artist friends as well. And he had this blog that used to showcase a lot of like new things that was coming up or like around the culture. So any like new like hip hop music, if there was new movies or anything that was coming out, or just general news about just the creative space. That blog was kind of the first exposure to like just creative news in general. That was kind of my door to seeing like, all right, there's creativity in the world outside of what I see on television. You know what I mean? And this is back in the MySpace area. So when everybody knew how to code and, we have our, what was it, like 7 friends on MySpace or whatever the case was. But yeah, I used to check that blog pretty much every day after school. And oops, I gotta put this in the wrong layer. And I didn't know what it was called, but I knew I wanted to do something like that, because the way it was set up, it looked like an apartment when you logged onto it. And there was different parts of the apartment that you can click on to get certain type of news. So you can click where like the DVDs and everything else were to see like the new movies that are coming out. Or you click like the record player and you can see like the new music that's like in the place, or whatever the case may be. So I was like, dang, this is cool. I want to make something like this. And like, I thought that was like just pretty dope. And my brother was saying like, hey, that's design. Like, he didn't really know like the correct term, like web design specifically, but he was like, that's graphic design. So I was like, oh, that's kind of dope. Like, I want to do this, like more of this or whatever the case may be. So did research, found the program, at the college at Mississippi State, and ended up going there and studying. And after a few years of school, a few years of an internship and working in agencies and ultimately going independent, that landed me here today. So
Nice. So you did go to school for design specifically?
Yeah, I went to Mississippi State.
And was it graphic design that you studied there?
Correct. They had a
Okay.
graphic design program there under the kind of the fine arts college. So I studied that for 4 years. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, that I can relate to a lot of what you talked about. I mean, just terms of like that gradual discovery that happens over time where you kind of slowly like are introduced to, I mean, one, you said your brother kind of introduced you, but then also that blog. And I kind of had similar things with people, you know, in my
Mhm.
life that kind of fostered that sense of like creativity, but then I found that online community that really sparked things. So
Yeah.
yeah, I can relate.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to give a shout out to just Creative South, Mike Jones, if you listen. That was another big like major point in my, I guess, creative career. That was kind of when I first found the idea of like a creative community. You know, it's different kind of when you're at school, like you're with students who are learning it just as well, just at the same time as you are, but being in a space where people have learned it differently from you and then can give you kind of some game of like how they approach certain things. But going to that conference was kind of my first exposure of seeing people like Jamal Collins and his work that he does a lot of things with kids in the Cleveland area, and he was speaking there, and that was my first like sign of like representation in the creative space. Like this person who looks just like me is speaking on the stage talking about design and also doing design with kids, which that's like that's already like a huge game changer for me anyway. So definitely shout out to them because that was like another big turning point for my career for sure.
Oh, that's cool. Also, Peter is asking, what kind of fine art were you doing?
I was doing mostly illustration. It was kind of like charcoal illustrations. I had they, in that program we had to go through those classes, and that was kind of one of those classes at first that was really intimidating, but it ended up being something that I grew to love. And I had a professor. I got to shout out Miss Suni. She was this professor. She was, she wasn't very tall, but she was like she took up a room. Like, she was one of those people that like had like that energy that literally took up a room, and she was very scary, but she was one of the best like illustration teachers I ever had. And also Mr. Bostic, if he's ever watched it, Mr. Bostic, he was another illustration teacher there that really showed me specifically a lot of just like kind of the business behind art and how to think of yourself as just as valuable as anyone else. That's like if you working with clients or if you're working with a company or corporations, they really, but that was my first like exposure to like really understanding the game of like you're just as important as anyone else that's in the room with you. So don't never like play yourself short. So yeah, that was illustration was kind of like the first like fine art medium I was like getting into before design.
Okay. Yeah, it's great to have influences like that for sure.
Absolutely.
I was going to ask, do you feel like those classes are what kind of influenced? Because I was going to say the fuzzies that you've created, they have a lot of like depth to them, you know, a lot of
Hmm.
shading and form.
Hmm.
Do you feel like that's kind of something you picked up in those illustration classes?
Yeah, I would think so. Those classes, I think it taught me more of like how to see than it did like how to actually draw. Um, I think though that time it was like, I didn't necessarily have like the hand skills or just kind of the way to, create something that's quote unquote, beautiful or up to standard. But those classes did teach me how to like see things and kind of understand light and find color. One of the biggest challenges that I'm actually super appreciative that we done was when we were doing illustrations, we weren't allowed to use the color black like at all. Like just you had to literally every time you bought like a set, like whether it's pastels or if you're doing something with color, if it was pastels, paint, or anything like that, they always tell us put away your black, and you had to mix colors and find colors within the black. That ultimately, that challenge, as hard as it was, it helped me kind of see colors a little bit better, and I think that was kind of a big influence with where we are now, of just being able to make things and mix colors and find combinations that literally make things feel more off the page than what you're actually seeing.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. All right. So I think we're pretty much done with this first one. I think there's some tweaks that we can make, but I think we're gonna do another one just to kind of have a few that we can kind of pick and choose from. So what I'm gonna do here, which is kind of a neat update with Illustrator, is that now we have our artboards tool here, and I'm gonna do is I'm gonna copy this over. Oops, oh, we got some lock stuff here. Well, which is fine. So we got a new artboard, so we're just gonna basically repeat the same thing we just did and try to see if we can find something that we can compare. So let's hide and see how this is looking. Not bad. I think we got a lot of tightening up to do, but because these are going to be a little bit thicker, I think we are okay on spacing. I wonder if we can, let me see, let's copy this over. Oops, let's try this. Let's add a new one. And we'll copy this over here. And then this one, we can just make some tweaks on here. Yeah, definitely always make a copy of your stuff if you can help it.
Yeah, it's a good rule to have. That and saving frequently.
Oh, absolutely.
Get that Control S on muscle memory.
Oh yeah. It's kind of weird. Like sometimes, like if I ever go back to like drawing on paper or something like that, I kind of like find myself, because usually I use like my thumb and my ring finger to hit Command Save, and like I'll be on my paper and I'll just like be tapping on the table as if like I'm saving my work on
Yeah,
sketchbook.
it's always the worst when I want to like erase something, but I want to like back it up first because
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to fix this hand, but I want to back it up. I can't.
Yeah. I feel like technology is on its way to like make that a thing. I feel like they hear us, like we know that's a problem. We're coming. We got you.
Yeah, I mean, more and more, like I've been doing some sketching on the iPad,
Mhm.
and I'm really like just impressed with the iPad as a piece of hardware. Like the pencil and everything feels real good, and I've been using it in
Absolutely.
Fresco, and I really like their sketching brushes in Fresco. But like I've
Yeah.
been saying that it feels like it's kind of, merging that gap between sketchbook and digital for me. Like digital that I'm used to because the control is there, but I have the digital tools to move, resize, backup, all
Mm,
that stuff. So I
yeah.
feel that a little bit already.
No, I understand completely. Yeah, Fresco is really nice, and I definitely agree with the iPad as hardware, because yeah, that was kind of a big game changer, like investment early on, and it was like, yeah, that was like a great buy, especially like
Yeah.
you starting off, you might not be making like the money that you want to make, but I would encourage anyone, like if you're on the edge of like buying an iPad, like buy it, like it will literally pay for itself.
Yeah. I mean, they are very pricey, but they're great tools. And especially if you have like anything that would benefit from a mobile workflow, like if you're, out and about a lot, that could be really nice just to be able to do everything on the go like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's so neat too, like, being able to share straight from there as well.
Yeah.
Just save your work and actually post through, Instagram or Behance. I think the mobile move is kind of like where, if the world's not already there, um, to make things much seamless, especially for just creators who create, like you said, create on the go. So yeah, I think that's definitely worth the cost.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm just kind of looking through the form and see if there's any opportunities that we can kind of fill in a little bit of these gaps. So you can see kind of the can is kind of feeling a little bit almost like it can fall into here. So I'm wondering if we can, maybe we tighten this K up a little bit, so that way it doesn't feel too much like an H, maybe. And then maybe we can add like a swoop or something. Almost like if it's, let's try this brush tool here. Like something that kind of like fits here, maybe?
Mm. Yeah, to kind of fill that space a bit.
Yeah. And maybe we have to kind of find a way that this kind of connects. Let me see. Maybe maybe we can, actually, let's do this. Let's make a copy of this so that way we don't lose it. And let's go in and see if we can tweak this K a little bit more. What I'm doing, I'm just hitting C, shortcut C for the cut tool, and I'm just going in and just cutting points of the stroke. So that way it separates them. So now I can like separate this as a whole. It looks like I already had another cut point as well. So let's remove that and let's just see. Maybe this, let's eyedrop it to give it the same weight, or I guess it is at the same weight. Oh, yes it is. Oh, that's the actual brush, that's why. Let's change this to kind of like a tannish color. And what we can do is, let's put this on a different layer. And yeah, oops, and we'll create on this. So what I'm doing, I'm just separating the elements on different layers. So that way I can draw on top of them and it doesn't really affect what we do here. Oops, let's make sure we get this on black. Oops, all right, here we go, okay. Yeah, this is kind of the tough part of freehand in Illustrator when you don't have a guide. Sometimes you gotta have to, kind of manipulate it a little bit. I really enjoy seeing like, the time lapses of, people kind of tweaking their work but I guess sometimes it's easy to forget that it takes a long time to do that.
Yeah. I mean, it's nice to be able to kind of like sketch it out like you did, do a little quick idea and then refine it.
Absolutely.
Also, Colby's in the chat says, dang, I'm late for Hank's stream. Welcome on in, Colby.
You're never too late, Colby. We're always waiting on you, my guy.
Also, we had a question in the chat from Alexis. And Alexis says, what are your future plans for Hank Designs and Fuzzies? Or where do you see it going? Or what do you see it growing into?
Oh, nice. That's a really great question. So for Fuzzies in general, kind of the goal of it, the ultimate goal of it is to get into an animated series. So nice. There are a few pieces that have motion to them, and they kind of have a little bit more life to them outside of just being stills. But the idea is to kind of build it as kind of its own illustrative universe that kind of help people identify with as well. It's specifically made by the culture and for the culture. So trying to build up that, rapport and know that it's something that people want to enjoy looking at, people enjoy to have hanging in the house. Ultimately, hopefully they enjoy wearing as well. And just kind of become more of a household name. And then the goal is to have it become something that you can see in an animated series and just see, these things in motion and have an identity to them. Specifically, we want it to be like entertainment for kids, just as well as adults, because they do have a very unique approach to them that I think, one, it's captivating for kids to keep their attention, especially for parents, but also something that, people like us or even older, just in a different generation, can feel great like wearing. I kind of feel like it's warm and fuzzy. It's kind of like bringing out the inner kid for them. So that's kind of the ultimate goal with Fuzzies, is getting them into a definitely a animated series. And with Hank Designs, ultimately just still growing. As of now, we're still like getting into more partnerships and just kind of being an extended arm just for people who are just needing creative work. Maybe you just need a different type of perspective on work, or if it's just, maybe a different specific type of approach. Maybe you need a fuzzy feel to the approach, but continue to just growing and scaling that and just become really just a vessel opportunity just for talent, to where they can find opportunities to work with, brands that they may not necessarily have the chance to work with on their own. But ultimately just be like a resource for like the next generation of creatives, you know what I mean? Whether that's like in an agency style or just being like like a directory type of thing.
It's cool. It's cool that you've kind of got this like long-term approach where you're kind of planning on taking this. There's, you know, there's always that potential to grow, and it's always good to kind of consider the possibilities for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially like just how like creativity is just evolving. You know, there's a lot of talent out here that is like doing things that is like mind blowing, you know, and I
Yeah.
think in as much as it is inspiration to like learn those things and try to do them, you know, on my own as well. I think it's like it's much more rewarding when you're able to have those people that can do those great things, but give them an opportunity or put them in a space that they can't necessarily do on their own. You know, like some people are very great at creativity or like making things, but maybe they're not the best in business conversations or things like that. And then maybe being a resource where you can, you know, help them through that or be that voice for them in a case, you know, whatever that looks like. You know, this is just an idea. I think that's kind of the gap that ultimately like I would love Hank Designs to feel between like the next wave or whatever creativity looks like in the, you know, in the coming years, and especially with the new talent, you know, that's following that as well.
Yeah, definitely. So you said the animated series for the Fuzzies. Do you ever kind of consider the characters that when you're creating the illustration, are you picturing at all like what their personality would be like, or what kind of character this could be?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the characters are inspired by just different people that I've encountered just through our life. There, some of them are friends, some people there's people that we may have, you know, seen out and about, or, you know, if we just like people watching in the park or things like that. And with them having very similar like body features, like, you know, definitely the round head, the donut mouth, the, you know, the Cheeto, some people call it the Cheeto eyebrows. Um, you know, the way to distinguish them is definitely like, you know, through the use of color and kind of the take on their hairstyles and kind of the facial expressions and maybe a little bit of the attire that we actually show in some of these portraits can kind of have or I guess you say be a mirror of what their personality actually is. And it's different. Some people are like very nonchalant about things. Some people are more you know, cool about things. Maybe they're more of like an exciting person. Some of them maybe have a different type of attitude as well. But you know, I try not to interpret that for people who are viewing them. I kind of want them to identify that themselves, and it kind of lets me know like you know, it kind of sparks, I guess you can say, this like thing of curiosity of like what actually makes them think that this character is like that. You know what I mean? What is it? Something? Is it maybe the way that they look? Is it something about like the colors that we actually chose? But I think that allows a more of an open world and a different type of interpretation, and then we can build on top of that based on if we ever see like, you know, a pattern or things like that. So I tend to leave that open to, you know, the fans of the characters as well.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool because there's definitely like different ways if you just see a character visually that, you know, that character could be a good amount of different ways in terms of their personality, how they act, how they talk. So
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Also, we got some people in the chat talking about their desire to see some fuzzy hats.
For sure. Absolutely. Yeah, if you guys go to fuzzies.co, there's actually a different like website that we have just for these alone. If you join the newsletter, we do have these coming very soon. We've done a lot of local booths in the area from where I am. And actually shout out to Creative Works who actually opened up that door for Fuzzy's booth out there in Memphis. And yeah, but if you go to fuzzies.co, sign up for the newsletter, we'll be announcing the release of these very soon. And if you're in the Georgia area, we are going to be part of a few festivals over the next month or so. So if you're local, like close to the Atlanta area or North Atlanta area, stop by. Like, you know, we'll be around.
Nice. And Annika put the fuzzy website and shop in the chat, so if anyone wants to check it out.
Perfect. Absolutely. Yeah, we have a few items ready, but we're getting ready to add the fuzzy set there as well. So coming
Nice.
soon, I promise.
Something to look forward to.
Absolutely. All right, I think we are cooking with gas now. So we have our composition here. It feels much more balanced. I think the swoop definitely helps. I still see a little bit more imperfections, but I think we're gonna move on and allow like the thickness of it to help us determine how we tweak this. So
Yeah.
what I'm going to do now, I'm going to do like a quick test. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just let me see, select this one here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to up the stroke obnoxiously just to kind of see how things are flowing. We can knock it down just a little bit. And a neat trick too, if you're ever like trying to go through strokes or like if you're changing like a number or anything, if you hold down shift, it does, and click here, it goes by increments of 10. So it's just kind of a quick tip if anyone's ever like clicking one at a time.
Yeah, that's a great
um,
tip. Anything that saves time like that is super helpful.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I think it's starting to come together. You can start to see some of the letters starts to merge a little bit. It looks like some of the feels of like the E is getting lost. But I think that's okay because once we get into this blend trick, we're still going to be able to see that these curves are actually on top of each other. So let me move these over just a tad bit.
I also like the adjustment you did with the K on fake. That's looking good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's becoming more of like a platform for Can, and I think it fills that space really nicely. So yeah, I think that's kind of another great thing. Like if you're doing lettering, you don't have to be so satisfied with what you sketch. Like take take the liberty of changing anything you feel is like not working once you vector it out as well.
Yeah, I was meaning to ask about the sketches. I mean, when you just look at it, it looks like it's done, so fluidly and quickly. But
Mhm.
do you do it a lot? Is it usually the first time you write it out, it's good, or is there actually a lot of like redoing each letter and
Oh no,
redos of the whole thing?
no, like the print on like the Z on my keyboard is like almost disappearing. Like it's a bunch of times.
Okay.
Yeah, but I think when doing there is a lot of like duplicating and just like kind of just tweaking. So sometimes in some sketches, I may end up with like maybe a 60 or 70 layers of just like drawing the same thing kind of like over and over again until it feels right. Sometimes you have to combine, certain stroke that you make to, other ones as well. So you may find one that you feel like works really well, like maybe like the F works really well, but the K on this one like is awful. So let's merge those together. And then you'll have like pockets of space that don't feel right. So you kind of have to, be patient with it. So that's kind of the best way I could put it. Like just really be patient with it and give yourself like grace. Like you're going to find something that works, but don't expect it on the first one. But if you get it on the first one, by all means, go with it. Like
It's meant to be.
don't waste no time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Because, like, if I ever do inking or anything like that in an illustration where it has to be like one stroke done perfectly, that's so tough. But doing it
It
for
is.
a bunch of letters, all at once, I can imagine that there's a lot of combining and redoing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like but I think you have to really enjoy it. I think that even though it is very like tedious and you have to kind of start over, but if if you can wait out and like really see that in product, it's definitely worth the journey.
Yeah.
I don't know if it'll be as fun if I was able to do this like all in, one like at one time. Like if I did it the first time and everything, I don't think I would. Me personally, I don't think I would enjoy it as much because it's like, oh, I can just, I don't have to spend no time on this. I can just do it last minute.
Yeah, I can relate because there's a certain amount of like when I'm doing my work, a certain amount of like discovery throughout the
Mhm.
process where it's a little bit of trial and error, and then you learn something like, all right, this is working, this isn't, let's try this. And it's
Yeah,
kind of this discovery process that's pretty fulfilling, I think.
absolutely. And what's cool is that you can, sometimes if you do a technique and you see that it's not working, it's very hard to see this. If you do a technique and you see that it's not working for this specific project, you can always go back and like apply it to something else that you're doing. You know, like if you have like a technique that you write your C's out pretty good, or if you write your F or, you know, Z's is always the toughest one for me. And you see that, oh, this may not be working for this project specifically, but maybe I can use this for like down the road. And then sometimes when you're running to a project where it's going to be like, oh, I tried this before, I know how to do this in a way that, you know, I don't have to take the long way anymore. I think that's kind of like something else that you can like keep in mind as you're like experimenting and finding like you said, that sense of discovery that may not necessarily be for that moment, but you know, it can always be for something later.
Yeah, those lessons transfer over because I get that a lot where you try something out and you kind of learn that lesson for later, but maybe the application for it, you know, just isn't for until another project. But yeah, it's not really the thing, you know, where it's people say it's not really failure, it's just learning something that didn't work, but that's information that you can still take with you to the next thing, even if it feels like, oh, 5 of these failed and the 6th one worked. But those 5 failures you can now apply to everything else because you can kind of know like what's going to work and what's not.
100%, 100%. When I was working in a startup as soon as I left college, one of the best things I've heard was a conversation between one of the founders, and he said, "I may not know like what like everything that we're supposed to do, but at least I know what not to do." Just because we were just a culture of like trial and error. Like we're gonna try things. It's probably not gonna work, but at least at that point we know what's what not to do in case that we ever need to like advise or like, you know, or, you know, tell anyone that's like coming up through the same type of thing. So, and I think that applies so much to just creativity in general, but you have to try. Ultimately just try things, and like you said, like it can always be something that applied to something at a later date.
Yeah, and I'm probably going to butcher this. I don't know if it was Thomas Edison. I want to say Thomas Edison, but there's a quote that's something along the lines of like, "I didn't fail. I found 1,000 ways that didn't work." And I think that is like, as a creative, I found that once I kind of redefined my relationship with quote unquote failure, it changed like so much, just because mentally, you know, every time you do a bad drawing or something, you know, you might get frustrated. But for me, it was always this sense of like trying to solve a puzzle, like, okay, let's try this. So this didn't work, but let's try this. And if you kind of just realize that it's like research, it's like discovery, you know, you're trying, you're experimenting and you're trying things that didn't work, but eventually it's going to get you closer and closer to where you need to be. And it's just kind of a natural part of the process. Like you need to do that to get there, but it's not bad. It's not failure. It's just, that's how you learn. So
right. Exactly.
I think kind of having that mindset, you know, has helped me a lot with frustrations with the creative process over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's so true. Like it is a muscle that you have to kind of train to. Like, I mean, I think it's a unfair expectation to feel like, you know, if you fail one time that you should already have that mindset set. Cause like, I mean, if you're feeling something, you're feeling something, right? But, you know, I think that, like you said, it is a muscle that you have to kind of train to like, all right, when you have opportunities or you fail more than one time, which is going to be inevitably happen, you know, you have to kind of like continue to train yourself like, hey, you're learning. Now, you know, if you do this again, it doesn't mean that you won't fail, but you may not do it the same way you did before. You may get farther, you know what I mean? It's just like when anybody tries out for Olympics, it's like, you're going to do better every year. It doesn't mean you're going to like qualify or actually win, but if you keep training and keep doing things, like you're going to get better and eventually you're going to be unstoppable, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
Cases. Yeah. And that kind of reminds me of like, what's the cleaning? Is it 409, the cleaning product 409? I think that was invented by a Black chemist that I learned, this was like probably back in like high school or something like that, where I learned that was that product, the name came from trying 409 times, and the 409 like attempt would end up being the product that actually works. So
that's funny.
You know, so next time you're buying cleaning products, maybe that'll inspire you to buy some 409.
Yeah, that's a cool inspiration for a name for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So what I'm doing now is actually, I'm actually experimenting, kind of like to piggyback off that topic. So I'm really happy with where this is right now. I think I want to try one more with this kind of look. Again, it's not perfect, but we have a few more steps with that. But I did try experiment with like combining the two Fs with just the uppercase and the lowercase as well. So we can see that there's kind of this nice connector loop here. So I just kind of want to see what that would look like compared to all the other letters. So what I'm gonna do is actually just remove these, and we're gonna actually just trace it over here and see kind of, let's just see what happens, you know?
Yeah, definitely. Also, Annika's got my back. She put the quote, I will not say I failed 1,000 times. I will say that I discovered that there are 1,000 ways that can cause failure. And then, yeah, it's
Hey,
Edison. It's a good one.
yeah, that's pretty dope. I like that one. So
Also, Annika's reminding everyone that we are indeed halfway into this stream. So if you have any questions, let us know. We'd love to hear them.
ask away.
And Elisandro does have a question. They say, what has been your favorite part of your journey so far?
Ooh, wow, that's a deep one. Man, favorite part of my journey so far. Favorite part of my journey so far. Man, it seems like, I don't know, it seems like so many parts were like maybe at the time when they were happening didn't seem so like great, but looking back like that's a moment like, you'll always cherish or never like, look down upon. I think I would say probably the most favorite, I guess my favorite moment, I think is seeing, I guess, the results of some of the mediums that I practice actually become like practical for like clients and things like that. Um, Having opportunities that I've had and being able to work with kind of, some names in the industry, just like, with Instagram and, wow, like the World Games that was happening here in Birmingham, and I'm sorry, in Alabama. And I think like having those moments where like you spend weeks and hours and trying to, come up with a concept or creating a concept that you solely created, either collaborated with or, you worked with a team with, and actually seeing it out in the world is kind of, it's super liberating. Lets you know kind of like, all right, you're doing something, like something is actually working. It's hard to pinpoint it at one moment, that's why that's a very great question. Um, wow, that actually has me stumped. But I think if I just had to answer, I think that is probably like the favorite moment. Any time where you invest time into a project and you're able to see it in like the real world or just see it practically used even for whatever you're working on that actually helps people, I think is a game changer. Like some of my most like, I think, heart-tugging projects that I've ever worked on were projects where I'm just helping, like I'm just helping out like good friends, or I'm helping out somebody that has like a great cause, a great mission, that wasn't always just transactional, right? Like it wasn't always about the budget. It wasn't always about, kind of the exposure, whatever the case may be. It was just like, all right, this is someone who is doing something that's great, that I believe in. And just having that opportunity to be like somebody they can trust and be like, hey, I put my trust in this person to bring this idea to life, or, bring this concept into fruition, and actually pulling through on that. I think that's like, those moments are my favorite moments. I don't think I have one, but anytime that happens, I'm like, all right, that works.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was thinking that's a tough question, but I think that's kind of the same thing I was thinking. Those are the
Yeah.
moments that are really impactful.
Yeah. Really great question though. I actually love that a lot. Ooh,
Also, Colby and Alexis are asking if you're going to Creative South next year.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I would definitely be there. And it's good that they're back right now. I know after, everything was happening and shutting down, they had their first like return this past April. So I think like now they're coming back with, full force. And if anyone has never been, I think it's a great conference to experience if it's like your first creative conference in general, or if you just need a conference that you want to, look forward to. I recommend that as far as like a creative, because it's not suit and tie. It's not something that you have to feel like you have to come with like your best foot forward. But it's definitely, they've done a good job of making it feel like relaxing. Like, sorry, just come hang with some other creatives versus like trying to stand out as a different type of creative,
Mm-hmm. Oh, and Annika put the chat for Creative South. Put the link for Creative South in the chat. Thanks, Annika.
Yeah. Oh, nice. Well, that actually fit in better, quicker than I actually thought it was going to be. I don't know. Would it be weird to ask the chat like which one to roll with? Because I'm actually kind of stuck right now.
Yeah, no, not at all. Let us know, chat, if you have which between those two.
Yeah, let me see if I can move it real quick.
Yeah.
Yeah, get them both in frame. And obviously it's not perfect, but I would love to.
Yeah, we could say left and right, I guess.
Yeah, we can do left and right.
Yeah, so if you have an opinion, put it in the chat, left, right. Yeah, I think they both work. They kind of have just a slightly different aesthetic.
Yeah, kind of a different feel.
Because my initial is to say left. I really like the flow between the two letters.
Mm-hmm.
But there is a certain shape that I kind of like on the right too. You would think the flow would just be a more natural look, but can't quite pinpoint what I like about that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not too sure.
Okay, we're getting a few for the left one.
A few for the left.
Yeah, are you kind of torn between the two?
I don't know. Like left, it has some imperfections, but I feel like left has like the most potential to look interesting once we get through the 3D effect. But the right, like you said, has like a, I don't know, it has like a, I don't know, it has an identity to it that very similar to the left, but it's just different. I don't know.
I think I'm gonna try to put this into words, but the F and the two Fs, they both kind of have a lot of flowing curves to them. But then that kind of like abrupt corner where they meet breaks up those flowing lines a bit and creates some balance. I think that's what I'm liking about that, but it's hard to put visuals like that into words.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, everyone's saying left. Umacorn says left if you're going to use blend. It would be nice if the colors would connect.
Yeah. Okay. Well, say no more. We're gonna go with left, and then I'll still try the right, maybe offline, and then just for anybody that's choosing the right that just wants to see it. So
yeah. Sometimes it's like
both parties.
Yeah, sometimes I got to work through something a little further to really like hit that point where I'm like, all right, this is the one I'm feeling.
There you go. Absolutely. Who knows? It might be like this one's like, this not working.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the right one. Okay. All right. So I think we've done a good job of getting through kind of the initial part. Obviously there's more concepts here. I just kind of chose the one I felt that kind of works. But you can see like how experimental we can get, because some of these have very distinct like looks and different approaches to just the letters in general. But we combined a little bit of like what this one has had, and obviously maybe a little bit of how the Kent and the D is from this one, and just different elements that we pull together that kind of comes together. So that for anyone that's watching that's doing lettering as well, you can see how experimental it can get. So don't put a box around the way you approach things.
Yeah,
if there's anything I can advise on as well. Sweet. So what we're gonna do now, and I'm just gonna hide some of these letters here, these different layers, just so they're out the way. second hide that. Now we're gonna get into the pen tool. So what I'm gonna do is let me get rid of some of these artboards, these extra artboards here. Let's move this out the way. And let's go in. I'm gonna copy this over just so we have our original copy. And let's get rid of this stroke because we got different weights on here, but we're gonna knock it down to 1 just so we can see it a little bit better. And what I've done is I've gathered a couple of just different color combinations. These may or may not work. We're just gonna try it as well. But what we can start with, and let's add a layer here. Let's just make this the background. And let's give us like something to work with outside of this white. And maybe we can go up here to our window. Let's get some swatches. Let's go into our color books. Maybe some solid coats. And maybe we give it kind of this nice, like, maybe like this pink color. That feels a little bit nice. Or maybe I'm just biased towards pink.
How do you usually go about coming up with a color palette for a design?
Not a like a harsh science to it. It's really just more of finding something that just kind of ultimately feels soft. I try to keep it more on the lighter side, even if I do have kind of a dark approach to it. It's never as harsh as like using like straight blacks or extremely dark colors that it's hard to distinguish from direct blacks or anything like that. So I try to keep it, either extremely like, cool if I'm ever going kind of a darker turn, but most cases it's going to be very warm on a lighter edge. So I try to keep it feeling very soft, if that makes sense.
Okay.
And I don't know why when I think of soft, pinks usually come up, but we're just kind of roll with it. Maybe we get a few combinations of these just to see kind of what we can.
Yeah. Do you have like a set color palette at all for things like your fuzzies to give them like a cohesive look, or do you just tend to pick it as you're creating it?
So early on when I was first creating them, to be honest, it was a little bit random. I was just finding colors that were more complementary than anything. But over time, I started just to mix match the same colors that I'd chosen before. So out of the fuzzy, there's only maybe like 10 colors or 10 or 11 colors that I actually choose from now building them. And that's just from over time defining like the right combinations that work. Maybe there was colors that I've chosen before that feel a little bit too harsh, maybe for specific looks and building them as a whole. So just omitting those, and as I'm creating new ones, I'm literally just kind of choosing the same palette, and it's really just a remix of those same colors. Now with some of the textures and like the shadows and the lighting, sometimes using like the blend modes and sometimes the texture does create a different type of color that feels like outside of the palette. But I think that's kind of like the voila moment of something that like, still using the same tools, but like combining them in a different way creates a whole nother like, look and feel, and a whole nother like palette, I guess you can say, that I can use for like further things.
Yeah.
But ultimately it's kind of like I just use kind of the same like 10 or 11 colors to, kind of give the same type of feeling as them as a whole.
Yeah, that makes sense that over time you'd kind of find the colors and combinations that would fit what you're going for that project.
Absolutely. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna kind of make my blend spline here. So what I'm gonna do is I like to find a color. When I'm kind of building out like this design composition here, the background is usually, I try to treat it like a mid-tone. So when I'm getting my color palette together, I tend to basically if that background is in the middle, I find a lighter tone that's above it and a darker tone that's under it, because it gives me a little bit of depth and kind of have this nice middle where maybe that can kind of either disappear with the background, or it can basically give us a nice middle ground to kind of, in a sense, get lost in a good way when combining these colors. And you kind of see what I mean here in a second. So what I'm doing here, I'm just going through and kind of finding a lighter tone. Maybe we can kind of work with some tannish colors. I think this kind of a nice up here, or maybe maybe we can use it as a, let me see, maybe we'll make one more. Maybe we use this as like a white, and then maybe this in here can be like maybe like a magenta in a sense. It might be like on the same hue. Yeah, that's kind of a nice combination. Oh, we'll just try it. And again, like, we're just kind of experimenting here. So you guys are seeing me testing things out live. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select all three of these here. Let's get the blend tool. And I'm just gonna go over here. And I'm just gonna select all three of these and see if we can get like a nice little blend here, which that's not looking bad at all, actually.
Yeah.
Kind of digging that. And the neat thing with this too is, like, when you're using the blend tool, you can always go in and adjust like your actual elements that you blend, because it doesn't treat it as like a whole, like, separate thing. You're just combining different elements. So if I wanted to go in and, like, if I wanted to make this bigger, now it kind of looks like that shape is going across and like almost like this Tron type of look, you know what I mean? To all my Tron fans out there. But I think I'm gonna kind of leave it like this. And I wonder, let me see, if we just do the select tool, see if that brings this all the way in. Yeah. And maybe we thicken it up just a little bit. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna make some copies of this. Let's just kind of move this. And let's start with the biggest element that we have on here right now. And what I'm gonna do is just select that. Let's select this first stroke. Go up here to object. Let's go to blend, and then let's replace the spline.
Oh, very cool.
That's looking nice. No, that's awesome. As you can see, it's very thick, so it does lose the form a little bit, but I kind of like it. I don't know. We can always go in and, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you gotta love those automated tools there.
Absolutely. And trying to see if we can, let's see if we can find. Yeah, let's see. Let's back up a little bit so we know that how that looks. But hold on, let me go forward, and then let's copy this and move it over, just so we can remember how it looks. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to release. Let's just move that over, just so we can know we're kind of just backing up, but I'll say like in a safe way. Maybe we can tone this down just a little bit. Let's make a copy, and let's select, and let's do the same thing.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think it's feeling a little bit nicer. It feels like it's in that space now.
Yeah, I really like that depth it creates.
And you see kind of like where that middle ground a little bit, it kind of stands out a little bit more. But if we ever want to like reverse the spline, let's see if we can, well, we can try to intertwine tool here. Let's see. What if we reversed it? Maybe not as strong as the first one. I feel like it does like show more support to the lowercase f, but I don't think it's as strong as before.
Yeah, it's interesting how much that changes the overall look.
Mhm. Because even here too, like we reversed it, but even if we go back and reverse front to back, we can actually pull it in front and keep the colors insane.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's just interesting how it's switching which F is in front of which. I
yeah,
do like how the pink kind of in the first F goes into that curve. That's a nice little
yeah,
area. But yeah, I think it works both.
hmm yeah. I think we'll stick with the OG for this one, and I think we can uh we can affect some of these areas where like it's kind of crossing over, but you can see that these tones are so close that it does get a little lost, but we can always fix that in Photoshop, which we'll get into. Um, but I'm pretty happy with this. I know it's kind of the first pass, but I think this is like great experimenting. So what we can
Hmm.
do is always, if we ever want to tweak the color, we can always just go back and direct select it. So even if we want to change this to like a deeper red, like it gives it a whole nother look as well. And that's the neat
Yeah.
thing with the spline tool. It doesn't make you change every individual element that it blends. So if you ever want to change the color, just use the direct select tool, select your shape, and yeah, you can make some really dope stuff with that.
Yeah, that flexibility is great.
Absolutely.
Also, welcome on into Andre and Madi, if that's how you pronounce it. Welcome on in. And Alexis in the chat says, exploring and experimenting is a vital step in the creative process. Yeah, I completely agree.
100%.
I think a lot of times the longer you can spend in the process, the more you can kind of find a unique design. Maybe that's not like the first one you think of, the most obvious, but really allows you to kind of get further out with it.
Yeah. And that's just the beauty of the space, right? Like, I think like creatives are, I mean, we're scientists, and at some degree, like we do a lot of experimentation to really like find solutions that work, whether if you're just an artist or if you're a designer, like you have to kind of try things. So I think that's kind of the beauty of experimentation. So just gotta have some fun with it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the fun part too, is just like trying to kind of find and discover that look or that thing that you're going for. I always feel
Mhm.
like when I'm doing that, it's like on the tip of my tongue, or I'm like just about to find it, but you got to keep pushing. And I don't know, the
Yeah,
whole process can be a lot of fun that way.
yeah, absolutely. And I feel like there's like pockets of like inspirational energy that happens in. I know like there are times where I'm like working and I'll get into this pocket of like, okay, I'm on the verge of something right now. I'm like we always call it the zone, but it's like I'm on the verge of something that's like super dope right now. I don't know what it is, but like it's getting there. And like,
Yeah.
you almost have to like cherish those moments for a little while.
Yeah, those are the moments like where you don't want to, maybe you have to go eat or you got to do something where you got to get up, but like you just don't want to get up from the computer. You want to keep
Yeah.
pushing because you're like, I'm about to find something here. Like I'm so close.
Yeah.
Yeah, those
Like
are the
I'm
ones
legit
that,
almost there. Like just give me like a few like hours.
yeah, it's those moments of like on the pinnacle of discovery that, that's when I'm having the most fun with the design for
Yeah,
sure.
100%. 100%. So now we're kind of working with the A. You can kind of see that it's starting to get a little bit too bulky, which I'm not 100% against, but I think what we're gonna do is before I move all that, I'm gonna make a copy of this, but then I'm still going to back up before we blend that together. And I'm gonna move that over here. And I just do this just in case, like if I'm continuing to move forward and I look back and it's like, oh, this letter doesn't really work out the way I wanted to, I always have it like stored somewhere and I can always go back and be like, okay, let me use this original one and replace it with this one. And that's kind of the another like really great thing of doing lettering here in Illustrator, because when you're doing it at strokes, like I can disconnect the letters like using the cut tool and cutting the anchor, the anchors in there, and actually replace that letter with something else versus, when I'm doing in Photoshop, if I ever connect something like, basically like how this A is connected to this N, if I was to write that out in Photoshop, I'll probably have to rewrite it, that whole, like those whole two letters over and over till I feel like, we got it right. But in Illustrator, if I ever wanted to just to tweak the A or like just the N, I can literally just cut it at an anchor point that feels like, safe to replace, and just replace that letter if I ever want to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah, I kind of do something similar what you were talking about when you're putting the stuff off to the side for later. Like I'll make copies of layers and that kind of thing, because it's good to look back at what I had before and make sure I didn't make it worse for one, but
Yeah.
also just to keep in mind, like, because sometimes you'll work for hours and you kind of forget what changes you've made at that point.
Yeah.
But it's also good for me to keep like my original sketches in mind to make sure I'm like going in the same direction, or at least if I'm going a different direction, it's looking better. But yeah, it's good to have that.
100%.
Good to have that reference.
100%. 100%. Yeah. So what I've done here, it looks like, sorry, thinned out the A just a little bit. It doesn't feel as cohesive, but I think we're close. So I think we had to kind of like find a nice little medium here. Not as big as we had before, but not as small as we just did. And I think this might be the nice like medium we need.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we reverse this. And also too, like if you don't have to feel like you have to spend so much time on just one letter. Like sometimes you may need to do the rest of them and come back to that letter just to see how it flows against everything else. Because that was kind of a big challenge for me early on. It's like I'll spend so much time on anything. Like I'll just work on that one spot forever. And then when I realized I put everything else with it, I'm like, I could have just I could have kept it where I had it and been completely fine. So I think we're good. Oh, did I? Okay, let me make a copy of this. Oops. Yeah, so I forgot to make a copy of this. Okay. I always make copies, y'all, so you can see. And we'll go back and reverse to back. Yeah, I think this is starting to flow really nice.
Yeah, I'm really loving the style for this. This is not kind of what I picture from like a lettering usually when I think of it, but I love the like, yeah, very unique style.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it kind of gives it its own identity in a sense.
Definitely.
Let me see. What if this one? Let's reverse it. Yeah, just so it looks like it's. Yeah, that's coming together really nicely. And what's really neat about like, having these colors, if you have points that kind of like need to feel like they're going together, you can always like switch up the colors to where you can see, so it can look kind of seamless. Because almost with this K, you can see that it goes into this tannish color, and right before it goes into the E, that tan color molds back into the white. So it almost feels a little bit seamless. Like we're kind of manipulating a little bit, but
Yeah, no, I definitely getting that look from it.
For sure.
Yeah, the blend tool, just the way it kind of flows the colors together and the depth that it creates is such a cool effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is just a great substitute. I know with Illustrator, like it has the new 3D features, which I think are great. But even if you're learning that, or even if you're not necessarily ready to fully commit to, kind of like a 3D software as well, this is kind of a great substitution to kind of like find that happy medium, creating that 3D look, but also having the comfort of using vectors if you're already used to it. So
yeah,
really, really nice medium. So now we're going to work on the fuzz, see if we can have that one looking pretty fuzzy. You know, kind of the same case here, but we can see. And I wonder if we can reverse the color. See if we can do that. Almost. It's like almost there. Like, see, that would have been like a nice like connection there. But you know, we can actually go in and let's just say, let's make a copy of this. Oops. And then we'll continue to go back. But we can always go in, just like we talked about before, like we can go in and make these. Oh, let me actually lock this layer. But just like before, like we talked about, like working with letters in Illustrator, we're able to like break up some of the strokes. And this is a case where we have the U and the Z disconnected. So we actually select those combined endpoints, like anchor points, and hit Command J. Now they're actually one piece. So now when I add that blend element again, it'll actually treat it as one piece versus two pieces. So let's go in, let's unlock this back layer. Oops. Unlock this back layer again. Let's move these off the frame. Select these two, object, blend, replace the spline. Now we have one big piece.
Yeah.
Let's see. Let me see if we reverse it. Yeah, I think reverse looks a lot better.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can kind of do the same thing here.
At least Sandra says, loving the colors. Yeah, this is looking good.
Sweet. Yep, I am a fan. I'm digging this. I think the background color can probably adjust too, but you know, again, we just needed a base to kind of work with. So,
Yeah.
you know, we can come back to that. So let's kind of focus on the can't and the. And I don't know, maybe with these, we can try a different palette, or maybe we kind of keep it. Let's see how it looks when we keep it the same. We're not going to experiment too much on those.
Annika says, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, you're good. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say Annika's comment was kind of looks like candy or ice cream. That's definitely the vibe I was getting.
Yeah. That means we're on track now. There we go. We got fuzzes. We have donut lips and Cheeto eyebrows. So I guess it makes sense that the letters feel like candy.
Perfect.
Candy and ice cream. Okay, so let's see how can't and D would look with the blend as well. So let's do blend. Let's replace the spline. It's not bad. I think that I like how it kind of like sits behind.
Yeah.
The fake and the fuzz.
Peeking out.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's see how it looks with the other ones. I feel like it may be a little bit too thick for the letters, but we'll just see. That's interesting. Like, it's not bad. It is, it's a little bit tough on legibility, but it may just be the white color, to be honest. So maybe that'd be something we kind of tweak before we move forward. Just kind of like maybe dim down that white just a little bit more, and maybe deepen that orange a little bit more. But I don't hate it. I actually don't hate it. All right, so let's see if we can extend this out just a little bit. But you can also see like how big of a difference it makes when you actually add, like when you replace the spline, it like affects like the middle stroke so much, just because the thickness is like, it's just so wide. Like you have to kind of like tweak it to where, you know, it feels a little bit more balanced. But obviously keeping it as just a stroke, you know, it's, you know, it makes it look a little bit weird. Maybe we reverse this one a little bit. No, let's keep it in front. I think that's nice. Make some duplicates. Let's get the C in here. Let's see, maybe reverse this one. Let's see. Okay. Play spline. Oops. Let's scoot this back. Yeah, just to see how that looks.
Oh yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. The A gets a little lost in there, but I don't hate it. Maybe we just adjust it with the T as well. And blend mode, let's do replace spline. And last, well, maybe this one needs to be reversed. Okay. And blend and oops. Object, blend, and replace spline. All right.
You got it all.
We got it all added.
Nice.
Now there is a quicker process to do it all at once, but it helps to do it letter by letter, just so you're able to see how things are forming together and you can kind of adjust a little bit on the fly. But if you ever just want to like do it very quick, you can select all of them and it'll replace the spline of everything. So
yeah. So I mean, you could even probably set up a hotkey for that too, right? Like any sort of repetitive thing I do, sometimes if I just get tired of it, I'm just like, I'm gonna put it to a hotkey.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think that's what I should have done, but I think it's almost like a wonder to kind of see it like, come to life and not necessarily know what to expect.
Yeah, it's also good just for the viewers to kind of see the process.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes if you're like firing off hotkeys all the time, it's hard to follow along.
Yeah, absolutely. No, but definitely learn your hotkeys. Like that's a game changer. Time and everything.
Yeah, it sounds like Uma Korn and me. We're thinking that at the same time. Yeah, anytime I like find myself doing something repeatedly or using the same thing, I try to keep up with it and be like, all right, maybe I could do a hotkey for that. That's kind of how I got all the ones I have now. If I catch myself doing the same thing too many times, I'll try to consider it.
Absolutely. I think that would be something like if I was just working on this at home, I would definitely, use the hotkey. But I think, being able, like you said, being able to have everyone see kind of where to go, just in case if you're just tuning in, or if you've been here from the jump, like, hey, this is where you can actually get this and make this happen. So,
like this workflow is new to me, so it's good to see all this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I think we're definitely cooking with gas here. So I think let's copy this and just see how it looks kind of on a darker. I just, use the Illustrator background here, but I'm loving the mystery of this. Like, I think it's like, I'm trying to read it and I'm wondering if like trying to make it make sense is like, I wonder if it takes away from it. You know what I mean? That's kind of where I'm like in between right now. But I do think the white itself, the white like colors, they can actually be a little bit more, I don't know. I feel like they can be something. What that is, I don't know. But let's try it though. What we can do, let's group it and then let's go in and double click just so we have it isolated. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna see if this works. So we use the direct select tool, go into the spline and select the white. And let's see if we go to select same and fill color. Oh, yes, it selects all of them.
Nice.
Perfect.
That's great.
Now that makes it so much easier. Yeah, so let's try like another color. I feel like we're on this like warm, it's like complementary with a little bit of like purple and orange, but I wonder if there's like an in between, maybe like a nice like teal, maybe.
Hmm.
I wonder if like how a teal would actually,
Oh, wow.
yeah, that's interesting. I want to like that on like a blue, maybe like a dark blue background. Like how would that look? Maybe like a deep blue or something like that. Yeah, gets a little lost. But you can see, like, again, like this is just like the fun part. Like you can actually try so many combination, and whenever you want to just do a series of these, whether you want to make the posters or print, like, do multiple versions. Like what happened, just to see like what would happen if this happens.
Yeah, I mean this process gives it so much flexibility with how you can kind of tweak everything after the fact.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, I feel like it still needs to be on a brighter end, but maybe we don't have it like, oh, that's actually that's actually funky and fun.
Yeah, it's kind of merging the two colors a little bit more than the blue was.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know. Oh man, this is where it gets weird. It's like you have so many like combinations, but we gotta choose one. We gotta choose
Yeah,
one.
it's the kind of thing you can play with forever. It's
Yeah, a
a lot of
hundred
fun to
percent,
do it.
100%. Let's see. Oops, that one. Let's see. I feel like it can go maybe a little bit lighter. Oh, I feel. Oh, that's me. I'm sorry. I'm actually like scrolling my mouse right before I like click. Okay. I don't know. I think I'm liking that one a lot. Maybe not the same background, but let's make a copy of it. Yeah, then we'll use that one as the regular, as a comparison. Oh wow. All right. I think I'm gonna need the chat again, just as a designing factor as well.
Between left and right here.
But between left and right, absolutely.
All right, chat. What do you like, left or right? I'll put in my 2 cents, and I'll say I do like the right one. I feel like the tones feel a little bit more like uniform. CJ says I think right. The lighter spots on the left are a bit distracting. Yeah, like the left has those strong accent points, which I guess is what I mean by cohesive for the right one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can agree with that. Yeah, I can agree with that 100%.
Yeah, it's so hard. Like it's decisions like this that are often so difficult for me to pick oftentimes in my own work. I'm like, it's not like a world of difference, but it's a noticeable one. It's kind of hard to
Yeah.
say A or B all the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, it doesn't hurt to have like, another opinion and just have a different perspective, because you be
Yeah.
so like deep dive into your working, like you have to take a step back or take a break. But it is always good to have like a different, point of view there with you, or if you just have like a group of people that you trust, that you say, hey, this is what I'm working on. What do you think about this? And they literally can give you like their honest perspective and make you rethink a lot of things. Got to be a little bit careful, but it helps.
It's super valuable if you have someone like you can trust like that. Yeah, because
Yeah.
you kind of have to be a little bit cautious about who you ask, because a lot of people have different opinions. Got to make sure
Yeah.
you value their opinion. But I'm really lucky because my girlfriend's an art director, and she's got like, she doesn't do illustration, the same stuff I do, but she's got like such a good eye. So I know anytime I ask like, is it this one or this one, she'll usually have an opinion, and it's always like the right one. So it's very helpful for me to have that like outside view of someone who kind of comes at it from a different perspective, but has
Yeah.
like that knowledge.
Yeah, absolutely. No, definitely shout out to the art director girlfriend. That's always clutch.
Yeah, super helpful.
Absolutely. No, that's awesome. No,
Yeah,
I think I'm sold. I think the right is what we roll with.
yeah, okay. Very cool.
Yeah. think that's what we do. So yeah, I mean, that's just kind of a great, like, and it's good that we kind of documented this as well, as you can kind of just see where we started from, um, from literally having a super, let me see if I can move this over, some super rough sketches,
Yeah.
and you kind of see like where like literally just an idea can go, from A to B and things like that. So I think that's kind of again, just another part of just the beauty of, putting these together. And I think, having that comparison, just to kind of see like how far experimentation can go, really changes the game as well.
Yeah, I really like both of those, but I do think I like the new colors. They have a cool
Yeah,
look to them.
absolutely. And I think they're working like different mediums too. I think on this like very neutral background, I think it like both of them play like a really like great part. So let's see, maybe we add a new layer. We'll just call these finals, so that way we know what we're working with. And now we can kind of like see like with background.
Oh yeah.
And with background, it helps a lot too, just to know kind of like how the colors will react. And then once we move this into Photoshop, which the great thing between like Illustrator and Photoshop, we can just simply copy and paste this into it. But what we may do is copy or send the Illustrator file within just the layers themselves. So that way we have everything in place, but also on different layers. And that allows us to add things like shadows, any type of texture we may like feel like works or things like that. So I think that'd be something more we can dive deep into, definitely within, tomorrow as well, just so we can recap and have a little bit more fun.
Nice. And just a heads up to chat that we do have about 10 minutes left in today's stream. So if you have any questions for Hank or anything, definitely let us know in the chat. But yeah, I was going to say the previous screen that you had with, we have the sketches, then we have the different color palettes. I think it's really helpful to have that stuff for your own reference, because you can kind of see how the piece is developing. We kind of talked about that earlier, like knowing how it started, kind of making sure it's headed in the direction you want. But this kind of thing, I think, is also great to have it for portfolios, because when you're showing your portfolio, so often people are saying like they want to see your work, directors and people who are hiring, they want to see your process, how you think, kind of your workflow. Also, like, what are they going to see before finished design? For example, if they see the finished product, it's helpful to be able to be like, oh, okay, he does the kind of black text first just to get the graphic shapes and get a better sense of like what they can expect from you and how it develops. So yeah, it's a great way to structure it for multiple reasons.
100%. No, you definitely nailed it, because that's, it's with just creative portfolios as a collection of work, everything is a story. Like it tells everything about you as a creative. It tells about, it'll tell like what you do as a problem solver, how do you serve, like how do you help people as well. And I think, like you said, like documenting that journey also helps them understand like what they can expect working with you. There are always been cases where like some projects, like, starting off in the very early stages, like you're showing like very rough sketches of anything, or you may have a super rough draft or something. And at least like they kind of know like, all right, I can expect this from this person, to know like when we're in the early stages, it may not look exactly like what I'm wanting, but I know that this person that's their process of going to the final product. So if you have in your portfolio, like you said, sketches of these, like, it starts off in black, it may not look as clean, but if I know that it can ultimately get to the end result, which is going to be like super nice, then, they trust the process a lot more versus it just being like, oh, this is just a polished product. Then, they kind of, it sets an expectation of like, like if I'm giving you something to do to create something, like I'm expecting the first pass to be the best thing ever, which in most cases that's not going to be the scenario, or it's not a great scenario to be in.
Yeah, it's like that way when you send them a client, for example, the initial sketches, you don't have to have that worry of like, I hope they know this is a sketch and this is not how it's going to look. It's just a rough. But if they're familiar with your portfolio and it has all that laid out, it becomes a lot more clear, I think.
100%. Yeah, and I think too is a trait that I think is very valuable just for being a creative or just being in the space is definitely understand the value of copywriting or in presentation, like being able to talk through your work and talk through your process can distinguish like your, I hate to say like not necessarily a level of designer, but it can really tell a lot about your experience and how much they actually trust your ability to do certain things. Like, so, when you're doing your portfolio, tell a story, like describe like what you were asked to do, what the challenges that you actually face, like who was this for? And if you have it, talk about the results, like how did this impact the actual client themselves? Was it great like from a number standpoint? Was it great from a positioning standpoint? Like how it actually impacted, and practice talking about it, because that literally will change the game for a client, so they know they're not just getting design work or lettering work or just artwork in general, which in some cases that may be just what they want. But if you can tell like a bigger story, especially something that like helps them in the situation that they're in, like that alone will make you 10 times more valuable as a creative.
Yeah, that's a good point. I did have a question on a similar topic of, you have Hank Design, you got your business that you do, you got the Fuzzies brand that you've created. Throughout the process, I think I saw on your Instagram that you've been doing the Hank Designs by yourself like for a few years now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I was just gonna ask, like, are there any lessons you feel like you've learned from this process in terms of like branding and kind of running your own business, going off on your own and creating these things, creating a cohesive brand? Are there any lessons you would say you've taken away that you'd want to share with people?
Yeah, there's quite a few. So, I think one that actually I think opened my eyes just from doing things like independently. And just for clarification, like Hey Design, it is independently run, but I do a lot of collaborations. I partner with studios and other creatives to kind of help with certain projects as well. But one thing that I think was super challenging and still kind of challenging for me as well is finding the idea of or understanding the idea of finding a niche, which is sometimes it's very encouraged. Like, if you are in the creative space, like find something you can double down on and find a vertical with it and really get great at it, which I 100% agree. I think that is one of the most practical things that every creative should like concentrate or at least focus towards. But I think understanding the idea of what a niche is what made a big difference for me. I think some people may classify as niches, like if I'm an illustrator, if I stick to a certain type of illustration, then that becomes just a niche. But to me, I think a niche is also a principle. Like, how do you approach work in general? Like, if you have a certain maybe just like a certain demeanor or a certain type of tactic that you approach work. So for me, I love things that are very bold, very vibrant, very colorful, obviously, as you can see here on the screen. But being able to have that as a way that you approach your work can also be a niche as well. So that when people are working with you or deciding whether or not they want to work with you, they kind of have an idea of what to expect regardless of the medium that you are offering. So if you are into branding, if you do lettering, if you do any type of thing, like, marketing consulting, like if you have an approach where you're either like just daring or like you want to be somebody that's like, I am very clean, I'm not necessarily like too much all up in your face type things, you can niche as a certain type of principle, like how you actually approach your work, not necessarily only in your skill set. Some people may disagree, but I think that was a big revelation for me. Working with just Hank Designs and having Fuzzies being kind of a byproduct of that is that you can niche in a principle in the way that you approach things. So that way people can have an understanding of your work as a whole and what they can expect to work from you. Because, if you like to do very like, I don't know, like maybe like if you're a big fan of like big bold patterns or things like that, you may not necessarily be the right fit for someone who's looking for a minimalistic branding look. Not necessarily, it doesn't mean that you can't do it or you don't have the capabilities to do it, but you're less likely to probably get called upon for that type of work for people who are like vetting you for a specific type of style. So that way, when you actually get those opportunities, you are in a space where you really can thrive as the creative as you are, regardless of the medium that you're using.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like a lot of that is just kind of like finding yourself and finding your artistic voice and knowing how
Yeah.
to leverage that into what you do.
Hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I think that was probably the most impactful lesson I've learned. But there's a lot more. I think if I had to find one that was, I won't say less than, but probably like tied for first with that is um really understand your position and how you're helping people. Like even though you are an artist or designer, however you classify yourself, like being in the act of service is huge, and making sure that you're not just giving them just something that you create. Like you want to give people, if you ever hire for anything, you want to give people something that is ultimately beneficial for them. There's been plenty of cases where I've turned down work and pointed people to more resourceful solutions or budget friendly solutions that puts them in the position that they need to be in if I'm not the person that can help, whether it's from a time or a budget, whatever the case may be, just so that, because sometimes when people are like starting up a business or they're doing things on their own and they're trusting you, a lot of times they don't have like a corporation telling them, this is how much money you have to spend and things like that. Sometimes it's coming right out of their pocket, or they have to go and like find the money to do that, which is very
Mhm.
challenging for anyone that's been in, that's owned a business or have gone after like funding or anything like that. So when you're
Yeah.
working with people that are in that position, just understand like you're in the space of service, and even if you're not the person for the job, be resourceful, like refer to people who are in the position that can help them, or if there's a tool or something out there that can help them do things just to get to the point that they need to get to, that goes a long way. Because I've had plenty of situations where that may have been, the situation early on, but down the road, they end up becoming much more like, successful. And then they actually have opportunities that fit for, me or just a studio in general to work with. And it ends up becoming something super magical. So,
Yeah. Well, Hank, thanks so much with that. We should call it here. We will be back tomorrow for some more, so definitely join us. Thanks for joining, everyone. Hank, thanks so much for joining us. It was great doing this, and
absolutely.
and we'll see you all next time. Thanks, everybody.